Hi, world history. Welcome to U15-L13 Basics of World War II, Part 3. Oh my gosh, congratulations! You made it to the last Miss Corey lecture video of the year. Good job! Does that feel great? Last lecture video. Man, after this, you'll never have to see my face again unless you have me next year for one of the other classes online. Super cool! Anyway, so yeah. Isn't that awesome? I know you have other assignments after this still. They're just not my face. Okay? You don't have to listen to my voice anymore. That's more of what it is. So, let's see your learning targets. Yeah, we've been through them. Your job, watch this ed puzzle, questions in blue text. I want you to answer directly on the ed puzzle. Any important concept will be in red text. Make sure you're following along with your study guide and writing all that stuff down. So today, we are going to focus on Europe and a little bit of parts. We're going to start off kind of in the middle of the war, and then we're going to work our way to the end of the war at this point. So let's talk about France and its fall to Germany. So in June 1940, German forces break through the Maginot Line. The Maginot Line is this big concrete wall from France built on the border of France and Germany. I'll show you a map on the next slide. Yeah, there it is. So here is part of it. Some were solid pieces of concrete. Some were more of like posts almost, just so like tanks and like cars can't get over it. Germany kind of has this really smart idea. They're like, you know what, France? We can just go around it through Belgium. And I'll show you what exactly they did. So right here with the solid red line, that would be the Maginot Line. Okay, so you can see it's on the border of Germany and France. And then you can see when it's France and Belgium, it gets not really solid. It's very incomplete. So Germany was like, you know what? I'm just going to go around. That's exactly what they did. They just went around the Maginot Line. Yep, simple as that. So once they got around the Maginot Line, they took over Paris. And that's pretty much it for France. Once Germany took over Paris, France was done. So Germany had control of France. French General Charles de Gaulle, who's this dude here, he flees to London, and he sets up a radio station broadcasting from England. So you're like, really? From England? That's so far away. Actually, at its closest point, England and France are only 40 miles away. And he tells the French people to resist the Nazis on the radio, which of course is easy for him to say because he's in London. So, since France fell, Great Britain had to fight Germany all by themselves. So, Winston Churchill, who's this dude right here, he becomes the new prime minister. He declared Great Britain would never surrender. So this is him in his own words. He says, "We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall never surrender." So one of the big battles was the Battle of Britain. That was July and August of 1940. And Great Britain was the main fighting force against the Axis at this point in time because their buddy France fell to Germany. So they're kind of alone. So Germany has this plan. They want to overwhelm Britain. Germany's strategy was to first establish air superiority over England, and then after that, send in ground forces to invade England. So as you can see here, between France, which is now controlled by Germany, and England, which is up here, that's only 40 miles in the Strait of Dover right here. So it's fairly easy to cross. But for Britain, they kind of have an ace up their sleeve. So Britain withstood the German attack, especially when it comes to the air attacks. And that is thanks to the Royal Air Force. The Royal Air Force is the Air Force of Great Britain. And they had this really cool new technology called radar. Yeah, so the radar system helped prepare when and where airplanes and ships were. So Britain could pretty much fight back against the Germans and knew exactly where they were at all times. There was the London Blitz. Now, this happened in September 1940, and that's when German planes would fly over London daily and just drop a heck ton of bombs. So much bombs, it was 35,000 tons of bombs at the end of all of this. So you can just see the mass destruction over here. So Germans attacked other Great Britain cities as well. But this kind of was a good thing for Britain, because if they attacked like other cities besides London, then the RAF in London would have time to rebuild their radars and forces that might have got damaged in the bombing. And in retaliation, Great Britain then bombs Berlin, which is Germany's capital, to strike fear in the Germans, just as the Germany was doing with the London people. So this was the first all-out air battle of World War II. It would end at the end of September with Great Britain winning. As you can see here in this picture, to kind of escape the bombing, people would just sleep down in the subway system to not like get killed by bombs. So there are 3 reasons why Great Britain had a victory against Germany in this all-out air battle. The first was the development of the radar. Second was the skill of the Royal Air Force. And third would be that the British government imposed a total blackout. So a blackout is when a government asks the civilians, or requires the civilians, to turn off all their lights, as well as to put like shade darkeners over their windows. So why would a blackout help? Yeah, it's harder to see from above, right? So if a German plane is flying above and the pilot looks down, they're just looking at complete darkness. They can't see where anything is, like any of the major like buildings and stuff. They're dropping bombs blindly at that point. Another really helpful thing too, with the city dark, the RAF could use spotlights like these here, and shine them in the sky so they can try to actually see where the German bomber planes are. So here's just another picture as well. You can just see how completely dark everything is. All right, now let's talk about America. So the U.S. stays neutral during the war. As we talked about, they don't clearly after Pearl Harbor. So FDR uses the policy of isolationism. Remind me again, what is isolationism? Yeah, that's when a country isolates itself from other countries' affairs, specifically at wartime. So the U.S. passes the Neutrality Acts. That means that the United States did not allow itself to sell arms to warring nations, and they could not give loans to warring nations. So they could not give weapons to Great Britain or France or Germany or Italy or any of those places. But that didn't last very long. So then America's like, wait a minute, we kind of are friends with Great Britain. I kind of want to help them out. So then America then does the Lend-Lease Act, and that was in May of 1941. So the U.S. saw its friend Great Britain really struggling in the war, right? Because they're the only ones fighting because France got taken over by Germany. So the Lend-Lease Act kind of reversed some of the Neutrality Act, and it provides military aid to Great Britain, and it indicates the U.S. has sided with Great Britain during World War II. So secretly, President Roosevelt, who's the president of the United States during this time, and Churchill, which is the prime minister of Great Britain, that's him right here, they were secretly meeting, okay? And they created something called the Atlantic Charter. So the Atlantic Charter is a declaration of supporting 2 things. First thing, free trade among nations. Second thing is the right of citizens to choose their own type of government. All right, now let's switch gears. Let's switch to Germany versus Russia, because we haven't talked about Germany versus Russia for a little bit. Oh, one thing, like I said before, I think Russia, USSR, and Soviet Union, they all mean the same thing, just FYI. Just 3 different names, but same country. So Germany attacks Russia. That was in June of 1941. Prior to that, Hitler took over Yugoslavia and Greece, which is kind of down here off the map a little bit. So Hitler, he wants to invade Russia, which would then break that Nazi-Soviet non-aggression pact that we talked about in lesson 9 or lesson 10, one of them. So the attack on Russia is called Operation Barbarossa, and that's where Hitler wanted to eliminate communism. He wanted to take over Russia. He hated communism. He wanted to overthrow the communist government in Russia. And he also wanted to eliminate any Jewish person residing in Russia. So he wanted this so badly that he actually deploys the specialized group called then, Einsatzgruppen into Russia. And what the Einsatzgruppen is a mobile killing unit, as you can see here. So SS officers, which would be these people right here, they would go town to town. They would gather up any Jewish person they find, they'd line them up, and they'd kill them, just like what's going to happen in this picture right here. So, Germany actually was very successful in its invasion of Russia, so much so that they pushed the Soviet army back into Moscow, which is the capital or the major city. 2 million Russian prisoner of wars then come under Germany's custody. But Germany has one weakness, because that is the winter. So, note to self, never invade Russia in the winter. So Germans have no winter clothes, lack of food, and it's just an awful winter that year. So German forces were just running out of supplies. They were freezing to death. They were starving to death. They had to turn back in December of 1941. 730,000 German casualties happened because of this. And a casualty does not always mean death. It just means when someone is either dead or hurt. So it could mean death, but not always. And let me ask you something. What else happens December of 1941? There's my hint. That's right, Pearl Harbor. So kind of like a double whammy for Germany right there. They lost Russia, and now US is going to enter the war. All right, so the Allied powers. So now it is the United States, it is Russia, and it is Great Britain. France is still considered part of the Allies too, but they can't really do anything because they got taken over by Germany. So they're kind of out of the game a little bit. There are other countries that join the Allies as well. I just don't talk about them. Those would be Australia, Belgium, Canada, China, Costa Rica, Cuba, Czechoslovakia, the Dominican Republic, El Salvador, Greece, Guatemala, Haiti, Honduras, India, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, New Zealand, Nicaragua, Norway, Panama, Poland, South Africa, and Yugoslavia. They're also part of the Allied powers. I mean, they contributed to it. It just, the US, Russia, and Great Britain were like the big ones. So the goal of the Allied powers were to fight until the Axis surrenders. And one of their other goals as well wasn't just in Europe or Japan. It was also in Africa. Now, I do not talk about World War II Africa, and I feel a little bit bad about it. You'll learn a little bit more in a next week? No, week after. Yeah, something like that. But as you can see here, Nazi Germany, which is in this red color here, had a lot of North Africa under its control. So one of the big battles when it came to Africa would be the Battle of El Alamein, which was right here in Egypt. So you can see it was right on the Mediterranean Sea. So Germany and Italy wanted to take control of North Africa. Britain and the US stops them in May of 1943. You'll learn a little bit about North Africa in World War II in U15-L13. All right, so next we're going to talk about the Battle of Stalingrad. So that was August 1942 to February 43. So Germany attacked Stalingrad, Russia, which is right here on the map. So this is a modern day map. So Germany would have been a little bit bigger than this right now. Okay, so this would be like Germany over here and Russia. So it's right over in here. So Russia stopped the German advancement on the Eastern Front, and it was considered the turning point on the Eastern Front, where instead of Germany pushing Russia into Russia territory, now Russia's going to push Germany into German territory. Then we have the Tehran Conference. So the Tehran Conference happened in November 1943. That's where Stalin, Roosevelt, and Churchill meet together in Tehran, Iran. Now, I don't know if I mentioned this. I think I did. Stalin is the leader of the Soviet Union / USSR / Russia at this time. That's him right there. And during this conference, they discussed the end of the war and the final assault on Germany. They also thought up the plan for D-Day. So D-Day, I'm sure you all have heard of this and learned it in US history. So I'm just going to kind of go over the very, very basics. So D-Day happened June 6th of 1944. And it was the Allied invasion of Nazi France. Remember, France fell to Germany back in 1940. This invasion was mostly made out of British and American forces, and it was led by U.S. General Dwight D. Eisenhower, who's that guy there, and then he would later become a U.S. president. So the more than 1 million men landed on the beaches of France. So you can see here, they landed right here. Here's kind of a zoomed in of it. You can see some of the beaches, Normandy being the biggest one. And then these British and American soldiers would then push in to German-occupied France and push the Germans out of France. So D-Day was really treacherous. One of the reasons being is there was a lot of underwater mines. So as the soldiers were getting off the boats, or the boats like hit the mines, very deadly. And then there was a lot of barbed wire as well. There were machine guns that were sitting up on top of the sand dunes, just ready to gun down any soldier that they could see. And there was about 10,000 Allied casualties at the end of D-Day. Okay. So you can see, again, the troops moving into the beaches and then across France and pushing Germany back. So here's some photos of D-Day. So you can see these soldiers here. So they would come in these boats. The front of the boats had like this like kind of lift gate. So the gate would lift down. The soldiers would walk off and try to get to the land. It was really hard. There was very little cover. So if there was a sniper sitting on one of the sand dunes, like a German sniper, they could just easily hit one of the Allied forces. Like a lot of times, boats were slaughtered by the masses. You can see here as well. So snipers would usually sit up here and just kill the soldiers as the boats were coming out. Okay. See a little bit more. All right. So the Allied soldiers want to take back France. All right. So 3 months after D-Day, Allies have over 2 million men in France. They broke through German lines, they take back Paris on August 25th of 1944, and the Allies keep pushing past France into Germany, okay? This leads to the Battle of the Bulge. So Battle of the Bulge, we could spend all day talking about this. We're going to do a long story short. So it was the Allies versus Germany from December 1944 to January of 45. This was Germany's last stand because now the Allied forces are pushing into Germany. Germany needs to defend its territory or else it's going to fall. So in Belgium and Luxembourg, this battle also happened and was right on the border of Germany. I'll show you a map in just a second here. The Allies would end up winning it, and they started to enter into Germany. So here's the map that I told you about. So you can see here's the bulge right here. You can kind of see it kind of sticks out like a peninsula. And then you can see the American forces are trying to kind of come in and like cut off the bulge from the rest of the German army. Okay. And after the Allies win, then the Allies will start pushing into Germany and then eventually take over Berlin. So the Soviets retook land from Germany, as you can see here in this map. So here's the Soviet forces as they're entering into Germany. And they enter into Berlin in April of 1945. So by January of 1945, that's when Hitler's like, oh crap, the Allies are going to win. And he goes and hides underground in a bunker. I'll show you pictures of his bunker in just a few slides from now. Here's one of the pictures of his bunker. So this is after he was dead. And here's a Russian soldier standing in his bunker. In April 28th of 1945, Mussolini, who is the dictator of Italy, died due to firing squad. And April 30th, 1945, Hitler commits suicide in this bunker. So here's a picture of Hitler's bunker. Okay. Here's a diorama of his bunker. So you can see, it had living spaces. It had, like office spaces. It had like sleeping spaces. So on May 7th, 1945, Germany surrenders. This is known as VE Day, or Victory in Europe. War in Germany is over, but World War II is not over yet because there's still Japan by this point. Remember, Japan surrenders what, in September of 1945? Yeah, I think so. Okay, anyway, the ending of World War II. So the cost of World War II, when it comes to lives, it was a heavy toll. So 21 million soldiers are dead. 40 million civilians are dead. 28 million of those civilians were Russian and Chinese. Russia had some really big problems with starvation at this point in time, so a lot came to that. There's also lots of displaced people. So 30 million people in Europe were considered displaced, meaning they have no home, they have no country to go to. So Germans that were expelled from the Sudetenland were one of them that didn't really have a home to go back to. Poland does get some of its German land back, so Poland does regain most of their land. World War II was incredibly expensive as well. The war cost about $4 trillion total. And economies after the war kind of fall into a slight depression. Now, it's not as big as a depression as like the Great Depression that happened in 1929 through the 1930s, but there's still a little bit of depression. It's mostly because, right, the industries were so focused on making war supplies. Now that the war is over, what do those industries make? So a lot of them turn to like household appliances. Like right here, you can see these. This woman's working on KitchenAid mixers, actually. But yeah, there is a slight economic depression in US, Britain, and Germany, but it's not as bad as the one after World War I. Decolonization happens. So Britain and France both really want to keep their colonies. So remind me again, thinking back to Unit 13, where were their colonies? Yeah, that's right. India was one of them. That's why I put this picture here. Remember the Salt March? So Britain and France, although they did not want to give up their colonies, they did. And Great Britain no longer had the wealth or military to maintain those colonies. So that was really the big reason why Great Britain gave up theirs. Okay, now let's step back in time just a smidge. So this is right before the end of the war. There was something called the Yalta Conference. So the big three Allied leaders, so we have Churchill, FDR, and Stalin, they met in Yalta, Russia, and this was February of 1945. So Stalin wanted to have some sort of buffer zone between the USSR and Germany. He didn't want them to have borders because he knew that they would probably clash. And FDR wants self-determination, which means that former colonies would then like choose the government that they want their new government to be from their new freedom. So at the Yalta Conference, all three agreed to allow former colonies to hold elections to determine the political system that the people want. Remember, again, the U.S. is democratic. USSR/Russia/Soviet Union is communist. During the Yalta Conference, they also created the United Nations and the agreement that the access needed to surrender unconditionally. During the Yalta Conference, there's also a creation of the 4 zones in Germany. So they're like, hey, once Germany falls, let's split it up amongst ourselves. And that's exactly what they did. So 4 big ally countries, so Great Britain, Russia, France, and the US, was split in Germany into 4. So you can see here, Great Britain had the northwest part of Germany. Russia had the northeast part of Germany. France just kind of got a little piece by their border. And then you have the United States having this yellow zone there. There's also the Potsdam Conference. So let's fast forward a few months to after Germany surrenders. That would be July of 1945 that the Potsdam Conference takes place. Again, it is the United States, Great Britain, and Russia, but a little bit different this time. So FDR, who's the president of the United States, he died. So the vice president, who is Harry S. Truman, he takes over as president, as a vice president does. And this Potsdam Conference was held in Potsdam, Germany. So during the conference, Truman knows that the U.S. had the ultimate weapon. They had the atomic bomb, but he didn't share that with anyone else, specifically with this dude right here, Stalin, okay? Because Stalin was also trying to make an atomic bomb at this point in time, but U.S. made it first. And that would be the atomic bomb that would then drop on Japan in August. So during the conference, Truman demands free elections throughout Eastern Europe. Stalin really hates this because free elections means that communism will not spread. They all agree that Japan needs to leave its territories that it took over in China and other parts of Asia. And all three agree upon what would become the Nuremberg trials, which I'll show you in just a slide from now. So here's Japan, again, at the height. They had all of this land that you see colored in. Japan had to give up all of this land. So the Nuremberg trials. Do you know what the Nuremberg trials were? If so, tell me. If you don't, that's okay. You just can say I don't know or whatever. So the Nuremberg trials happened from 1945 to 49 in Germany. And what it was is what Nazi and other Axis powers were put on trial for war crimes for World War II and the Holocaust. So there were 22 major war criminals who were tried during this. 12 of them were convicted and sentenced to death. 3 were convicted and sent to life in prison, and 4 were convicted to non-life in prison. Which now just makes me realize it doesn't add up to 22. Interesting. Okay. So at this trial, the trial shows that national leaders can be held responsible for war crimes against humanity. So never before had such powerful world leaders been tried for these inhumane crimes. Then let's talk about post-war Japan. So like we said, atomic bomb drops August of 1945. Japan surrenders just a couple weeks afterwards. August 14th, August 14th, that's when Japan surrenders, called VJ Day or Victory in Japan Day. The U.S. military then comes in and they occupy Japan. So the U.S. takes over Japanese government entirely. And they appoint Douglas MacArthur, who's this dude right here, to control Japan's government. So Douglas MacArthur began something called demilitarization, and that is disbanding the Japanese military. The reason for this was to stop the threat of war again, and to this very day, Japan is still not allowed to have a military. Yeah, did you know that? Is that interesting? Yeah, so instead of having a military, they just pretty much use the U.S. So Douglas MacArthur, like I said, demilitarization. So today, Japan has something called the Self-Defense Force, or the JSDF. It's kind of like a military, but it's not technically a military, but pretty much military. There's about 274,000 members. And the reason why U.S. has 23 military bases in Japan today is because the U.S. pretty much is Japan's military, and they help train these JSDF forces. So here's a map of some of the major military bases as of 2016 in Japan. So under MacArthur, Japan was also going through something called democratization. And that's where Japan would create a new government and a constitution. And they created a constitutional monarchy. So what a constitutional monarchy is, just kind of like Great Britain's constitutional monarchy, is where there is an emperor, or in Great Britain case, there's a king, but in Japan, there's an emperor. And that emperor is a figurehead. Okay, it doesn't really have political power. It's just there for show. And then elected officials and the prime minister would be the ones that actually have the government power. Okay, so Japan occupied under the United States until 1952. And still is an extent today, with the U.S. military being so involved with Japan. So if you ever go to an antique shop, or if you go to your grandparents' house or something like that, and if you ever look at the bottom of vases or some knickknack kind of things, you might see a symbol like this, made in occupied Japan. That means that item was made during the U.S.'s control over Japan. All right, let's wrap this up. Oh my gosh, my voice is getting kind of ugh. So today we learned about Charles de Gaulle, Winston Churchill, Battle of Britain, Atlantic Charter, Battle of Stalingrad, D-Day, Dwight D. Eisenhower, Battle of the Bulge, Nuremberg trials, demilitarization, democratization. Oh, next up, you are going to watch U15-L13, The Last Survivors Part 1, and then L15, The Last Survivors Part 2. That is a documentary about Holocaust survivors in like today and age and kind of reflecting upon that. Then after that, you're going to do lessons 16 through 18, which are the boy in the striped pajamas, which I know I talked about a couple of videos ago. Again, there's no note taking for the boy in striped pajamas. Just answer the big questions at the end of each of the videos. Again, I am looking for very solid and numerous details from the movie in order to receive all points. After that, you're going to do U15-L13, Holocaust in the Today worksheet. Make sure you watch both the videos and answer the questions. Do U15-L20, World War II in North Africa. So that's just a 6-minute ed puzzle from the History Channel about the U.S. involvement in World War II, North Africa. It'll explain it better than I ever could. Then we have U15-L21, World War II video choice. You need to choose 2 of the 4 videos to watch. If you want 2 extra credit points on your Unit 15 test, you can watch all 4 and you can get those 2 extra credit points if you answer every single question correctly, okay? After that, you can do U15-L22, British Spies Part 1. There, you are going to answer the questions directly in the ed puzzle, and I will be grading what you get right or wrong on that, just FYI. Same thing with U15-L23, British Spies Part 2. It's going to be the same thing. I will be grading based on what you get right or wrong on the ed puzzle. Oh, so much. And now you're probably like, what about the final? Do we have a final? Yes, you don't really. Your final is the Unit 15 test, okay? There is no cumulative final. It's just the Unit 15 test, okay? So I have blocked off June 3rd for 5th for that. It is a multiple choice test. Again, it is only going to be about Unit 15, which is your World War I and World War II. It is the final last test, okay? But again, it's just about Unit 15. It will be due Wednesday, June 5th at midnight. Wednesday, June 5th at midnight, okay? If it is not turned in by Wednesday, June 5th at midnight, it will not be graded, okay? Like dead serious about that because I'd lose access to the grade books at like some point. So again, here's kind of what our calendar is looking like. So again, 3rd, 4th, and 5th, those are all for test days, okay? All right, quick quiz. When is the Unit 15 test due? It is due Wednesday, June 5th at midnight. All right, before I go, what questions do you have about now until the end of the school year? If you don't have any, you can just type none. All right, that was it for lecture videos. Look at that. Nice. So I hope you enjoy the rest of the school year. I hope you enjoy the rest of Unit 15 between like World War II and Rome. These are probably like the best units. Thank you again for being part of the online world history. And if you have any questions, please let us know. We are here to help you. If not, I hope you have a fabulous summer break once you get done with Unit 15 stuff. Bye.